Long time no see. Welcome back to Inside Indiana Overtime. I'm Alex McCarthy from Inside Indiana. Out at the football stadium at Memorial Stadium tonight instead of at Assembly Hall last night for the IU basketball game. Here, where Indiana beat Illinois today 52 to 35 to get their fourth win of the season, matching their total from last year, which is obviously a big deal. But the story of the night is the numbers that Indiana put up. They put together 650 yards of total offense. That matches the all-time Indiana record. It sets the all-time Memorial Stadium record, and a lot of it was derived from balance on offense. They had 371 yards on the ground, and obviously the rest were through the air from Nate Sudfeld and Trey Roberson. Primarily Sudfeld, obviously he got the start tonight after coming off the bench against Minnesota. But the run game was really what fueled Indiana today. Last week against Minnesota, we saw in the second half when Indiana was kind of lethargic, when the run game started going, that the offense really opened up, and Indiana got on a run, got back into that Minnesota game. Obviously took the lead in the last couple of minutes and lost it. But today they had the run game from the beginning of the game from both Tevin Coleman and Stephen Houston, and in terms of offense, they rolled today. They scored 52 points, obviously, 650 yards, 371 on the ground. Tevin Coleman had 215 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had 215 yards on 15 carries. That's an average of 14 yards a carry. He had touchdown runs of 64 and 75 yards. I mean, and just huge gains all over the field. I mean, I use defensive players and coaches have talked about how so-called explosion plays, these big bursts, these big gains, have been one of their big Achilles heels this season. But today for IU and for Illinois, they had a lot of big plays today too. But for IU today, that was really their strength was the ability to get a couple of good plays together and then hit you with a 25-yard or even like a 40-yard gain or something like that. I mean, they had touchdowns of, what was it? I mean, Coleman had his 64-yard touchdown. And Cody Latimer had back-to-back touchdown passes that were 41 yards and 50 yards. And then, of course, Coleman scores the last IU touchdown on a 75-yard run that gave them their lead of the game, which they obviously maintained throughout the finish of the game. But yeah, Indiana just intensely a big threat team today, both through the air and on the ground. Sudfeld, as I said, got the start. He was 20 for 27 for 267 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did throw one pretty ugly interception. After the game, he was really frustrated with he saw a corner blitzing, which was not something he saw on tape from Illinois. And so, he sees the corner blitz. He thinks the receiver on that side is going to be open. They dropped a linebacker back, and easy interception for the Illinois player. That looked like it was going to be a really significant play because Illinois kind of had the momentum. They had just scored. They had the ball back. Indiana's defense gets a big stop there. Indiana gets the ball back and ends up winning the game, obviously. And we can talk about the yardage totals, the scoring totals, all we want tonight. But what players, coaches are saying after the game is the important statistic here is that they got this win. For the first time, they lost 3 in a row to the Michigan schools, and then came back here and fell to Minnesota last week. So it was good for IU to get back, kind of on schedule, more or less on schedule, with beating Penn State and now beating Illinois. Still quite an uphill battle for them to try to get to a bowl game. They go to Wisconsin next week, then to Ohio State, and then come back to Purdue, which continues to look like probably one of the easier tests on IU's schedule, but kind of a big statement for IU tonight to, we were saying this a little bit last year was when they beat Illinois and they beat Iowa was Indiana's starting to beat teams that they are better than. I mean, they're clearly a better team than Illinois just in terms of personnel, in terms of experience, just the overall package. They should have beat Illinois and they did beat Illinois. It was kind of up in the air for a while there. Illinois takes a lead right at the beginning, or I guess, midway through the third quarter, 35-28, and then Indiana scores the rest of the points the rest of the day to finish with that 52-35 victory. And Or it was no, Illinois was up 28-21, I think. And and then IU closes on that big run, where it was a lot like last week later in the game against Minnesota, where IU was able to really build off a good defensive possession to a great offensive one, to a good defensive one, to a good offensive one, and that's just something that we haven't really been able to see much of these past couple of years from Indiana, is that ability to really be able to play off one another, and that's what they did tonight. They got into a rhythm which they really struggled in the first half against Minnesota to get into, and they stayed in it really for most of the game today, and beat a team, like I said, a team they should have beaten. There are a couple beatable teams on IU's schedule this season. Penn State actually now looks a lot more beatable than they did back when Indiana beat them. They had kind of an ugly game today, and it's like I said, it's an important step for Indiana to be taking to beat Big Ten teams, especially that they are better than. Of course, this season might not end in a bowl game, and it might end in some defensive shakeups with how the defense has been a little rough this year and been a little porous. I mean, we're talking about Indiana's offensive numbers, and they still allowed 612 yards from Illinois. Nate Scheelhaus has a huge game. He passes for 450 yards, 2 touchdowns, runs for another one. Steve Hull, their top receiver, had 9 catches for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns. Which, I mean, he was another big play threat for Illinois, where Indiana got burned on a couple plays, including a 54-yard touchdown to him, where there is nobody within 20 yards of him. So there's still those concerns on defense, where you're just kind of losing the taint on guys. And for a while, Indiana was playing without Tim Bennett, their best corner, who had a concussion kind of thing. They're playing without Mark Murphy, and they're playing without Greg Keevan, both their safeties. And somehow they kind of weathered that storm. They were able to get a couple stops, and then Murphy and Keevan came back into the game. Murphy actually ends up getting the interception that really seals the game for IU in the final minutes. And that's also another important thing is Indiana's really learned to deal with injuries this year. I mean, Colin Rarig missed today's game with a back issue, so Wes Rogers stepped in at the center position, and the offensive line obviously had a great game, allowing IU to run for 370 yards, to pass for a couple hundred more. And so that's another kind of sign of, Kevin Wilson was saying this after the game, it's a sign of maturity that they've been here 2 or 3 years. Now they know what they have to do. They know how to deal with, one guy going down and another guy coming back up. So a lot of important steps we saw from Indiana today. Obviously, not sure that this season is going to translate into a bowl game, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out a big part of that next weekend when Indiana travels up to Madison. I won't be there. I don't think I'll be there for Wisconsin or for Ohio State, but I'll definitely be here during the Bucket game. And also, kind of on an unrelated note, thanks for everyone for sticking with the site. There were some technical issues, obviously, during the game and after the game today. And also, major props to the 24/7 technical crew. They came in and got the job done in a couple hours that seemed like, there were some estimates that it would take a lot longer, and they got it up actually in a pretty timely manner. But again, thanks for sticking with us, this whole week through the beginning of basketball season. We obviously have another basketball game coming up to cover on Tuesday against LIU Brooklyn. I'll be there, as always. So, stay with us through the weekend. We're going to have football coverage, talk to some recruits who are in town, and then also get going even a little bit more on basketball. So, I'm Alex McCarthy. This has been Inside Indiana Overtime, and I'm sure I'll see you very soon, or you'll see me very soon, rather.